This is what I think about your protesting.
Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get off the field right now, out, he's fired. He's fired!
Who's brought stripes and bright stars?
The only flag that's going to fly in my house anymore is the United States flag.
While a good chunk of America embroils itself in the astounding irrelevancy of football, flags, and anthems, the true problems caused by the true criminals, the ones we should all be focusing our attention on, continue to sip champagne, eat caviar, and smoke the finest Gurkha Black Dragon cigars as they plot their next piece of masterful psychological conditioning of the masses. Their groundwork of polarizing people by popularizing the tribal mentality and ardent, blind, unquestioning patriotism has obviously worked like a well-polished charm. Divisions are being created and cemented, and the conquering that's been going on for a while seems to be accelerating. The recent scene of division has revealed that the American spirit hangs by such a tenuous thread that it can be torn down with a single perceived act of defiance, like taking a knee. Unbeknownst to the population at large, rulers absolutely love it when citizens pledge to support a flag, a uniform, a badge, or a song. They love the fact that fans flock to stadiums and arenas in tribal fashion and take so seriously the outcome of a meaningless game and the strength of a fabricated rivalry, while they, the rulers, help themselves to 30, 40, or even 50% of those fans' hard-earned income by means of mandatory taxation and the hidden tax called inflation, made possible and accelerated by the distribution of fiat currency, which is another real problem Americans should be united against. Bread and circuses, the superficial means of appeasement voiced by the poet Juvenal in 100 AD, by which the government kept the Roman populace happily distracted by distributing free food and staging huge spectacles, still works in our day. Why does such a polarizing method work so well? Because pledging allegiance to inanimate objects and tying them inextricably to feelings of patriotism is much more simple than asking people to pledge their allegiance and support to actual tyrannical government policies or the warmongering, money-wasting politicians themselves. If we made people stand at sporting events and pledge their allegiance to the IRS, or sing songs about the devaluing of our currency by the Federal Reserve, or make long public citations about how the youth of our country are being systematically deployed and destroyed abroad to enrich global elitists and their military-industrial complex, or sing emotionally charged songs about Reagan, Bush, Obama, Hillary, or Trump, We would definitely not see calls to fire, deport, jail, or beat those who remain seated during continuing indoctrination ceremonies. In fact, almost no one would stand, other than the true diehard statist. By conditioning people to focus on symbols that could just as easily be used in any other country, the same countries that the American people have been brainwashed to hate for no real reason at all, mostly lies in all reality, has been successfully socially engineered in our society because that line of thinking keeps the people from talking about and going after their real enemy, the same enemy of all people throughout history: government. Governments lock disobedient into place even further by pretending that mundane things like flags and songs represent other things like soldiers, police, freedom, and liberty. This way, it's very hard for anyone to question real things because it seems they're attacking the imaginary representation rather than simply questioning the pledge or song or flag. After years of social engineering like this, the people come to think that it is perfectly normal to be offended when someone doesn't stand for something as simple and mundane as a flag or a song. And if you take anything away from this video, take this: advertising works. In fact, it works so well that advertisers spend huge chunks of money to sell people on the idea that their product or service is worth your devotion and, of course, your money. What does advertising have to do with the current NFL versus Trump main event? You'll see in a couple seconds. According to ad buyers, the average cost of a 30-second ad for the Super Bowl crept up to $5 million this past year. $5 million for 30 seconds. That's about $167,000 every second. Do you know how many tennis shoes, cans of Coke, 6-packs of beer, and insurance policies you'd have to sell to recoup those advertising dollars? But they do it because they know their commercial is going to be exposed to a massive audience that will respond positively to their campaign. So keep the potency of advertising fresh on your mind as we deal with the apparent topic of the day: the NFL's Take the Knee protest that seems to have driven the wedge of division further into the fabric of America's people. The American government pays the NFL to tell its players to stand during the national anthem. And it turns out that from 2011 through 2014, the Department of Defense spent $5.4 million on contracts with 14 NFL teams for flag ceremony. The National Guard got in on the action too and gave $6.7 million to the NFL for the same kind of thing from 2013 to 2015. Let me lay this out in legal terms. The First Amendment prohibits any government entity from forcing an individual to say anything. That's the basic concept of free speech. In a related story, forcing people to salute the flag or swear an oath of loyalty to the government is pronounced tyranny. But private organizations, including employers like the NFL, can require employees to say or not say whatever they choose, so long as that speech doesn't offend some other law. The NFL is well within its rights to require as a term of employment that every player sing the national anthem, stand during its playing, or salute the flag. It's basically the same rule that allows TGI Fridays to require its servers to ask, "Is this your first time dining with us today?" when you sit down to order wings. If employees don't do what's expected and contracted, then they've breached their contracts. It's as simple as that. It's also not a First Amendment issue because, again, private employers are not government guarantors of constitutional rights. Of course, the First Amendment implications become murkier when you throw in interference from the President of the United States, but that's a whole other topic. Before 2009, football players standing for national anthems wasn't even a thing. The team stayed in the locker room until after this part.
And the whole mother parade.
And then they ran onto the field. No one was offended, and no one was on cable news eliciting tears from disrespected military families. But then the Department of Defense and the National Guard got involved. They began to pay the NFL millions of dollars to have ostentatious flag ceremonies before games. Jumbotron performances, and military flyovers. If the waste of taxpayer money isn't gross enough, you learn about the motivation behind the expenditure. The DoD and the National Guard were marketing to sports fans. Remember the potency of advertising? The concept was that if sports fans saw their favorite athletes standing for the Star-Spangled Banner or saluting the flag, they'd emulate that behavior and become more patriotic themselves. Kind of like a nationalist version of a Nike endorsement contract. I'll leave open the question of why the US government didn't also see fit to sponsor other praiseworthy behavior by high-profile athletes, like living non-violent personal lives, refraining from using deadly pharmaceuticals, and paying taxes. ESPN's Stephen Smith covered this matter on ESPN's First Take in 2016 when players first began the recent on-field protest trend.
Let me read something to y'all real quick. It wasn't until 2009 that until 2009, no NFL players stood for the national anthem because players actually stayed in the locker room as the anthem played. The players were moved to the field during the national anthem because it was seen as a marketing strategy to make the athletes look more patriotic. The United States Department of Defense paid the National Football League $5.4 million.
I've been talking about
$5.4 million between 2011 and 2014, and the National Guard $6.7 million between 2013 and 2015 to stage on-field patriotic ceremonies as part of military recruitment budget line item.
As part of the new relationship between the DoD and the National Guard, the NFL changed its practices and began bringing players on field during the playing of the national anthem for some inspiring displays of heartfelt patriotism. The outrage over this widespread refusal to continue the practice is proof positive that the DoD's marketing dollars hit their mark. Patriots, who never noticed the change in 2009, have been suddenly driven into a frenzy over players' refusal to continue being used as props in the NFL's high-priced performance of America. The Senate Oversight Committee issued a statement and corresponding report condemning the practice of paid patriotism as charades, saying in part, "Unfortunately, contrary to the public statements made by the DoD and the NFL, the majority of the contracts, 72 of the 122 contracts we analyzed, clearly show that DoD paid for patriotic tributes at professional football, baseball, basketball, hockey, and soccer games. These paid tributes included on-field color guard, enlistment and re-enlistment ceremonies, performance of the national anthem, full field flag details, ceremonial first pitches, and puck drops. The National Guard paid teams for the opportunity to sponsor military appreciation nights and to recognize its birthday. DoD even paid teams for the opportunity to perform surprise welcome home promotions for troops returning from deployments and to recognize wounded warriors. Ultimately, the Senate was pretty clear in its conclusion that paid patriotism was not only distasteful, but also a gross misuse of taxpayer money. They said this: "Even if we accept the DoD's assurances that the young men and women watching these games may be sufficiently inspired to military service by a halftime re-enlistment ceremony, some of the displays funded in these contracts defy explanation as a legitimate recruiting purpose and may be little more than a taxpayer-funded boondoggle." Unfortunately, warmonger and all-around traitorous political parasite Senator John McCain said it best. Given the immense sacrifices made by our service members, it seems more appropriate that any organization with a genuine interest in honoring them and deriving public credit as a result should do so at its own expense and not that of the American taxpayer. Americans deserve the ability to assume that tributes for our men and women in military uniform are genuine displays of national pride rather than taxpayer-funded DoD marketing gimmicks. The problem with McCain's statement is that the immense sacrifice made by these service members further increases the coffers and global strength of those who pull the levers of power behind the military-industrial complex. And the misguided patriotism of the masses unknowingly applauds these elites as they advance to take over more of your property, more of your time, and lead us to a fast-approaching world war and subsequent global government. The bottom line nobody seems to notice is that they're applying Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals. Several politicians have lauded Alinsky in their speeches. Hillary even wrote her college thesis on Alinsky's work. In the book, there are 13 rules for radicals that they use to achieve their goals. This charade of distraction and division with the NFL and the national anthem is no different than the rest of the made-for-TV distractions. What is Rule 13? Pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize it. How about we all stop falling for this? People speak about disrespecting a flag or the perceived sacredness of a national anthem. Maybe we should start considering that the ultimate disrespect is to continually allow our young to be used as cannon fodder in Fortune 500 wars, while we hail the very criminals who devalue our money and drag us into war in the first place.